Dr. Frieden, is anthrax a biological agent that has been or could be used in warfare?
Yes.
And the mishandling of anthrax can have some real consequences. If someone were sickened by anthrax, what would some of the symptoms be?
Anthrax can cause a variety of symptoms, but the most severe forms are respiratory anthrax, which can cause severe illness or death.
Oh, I have an image here of some lab, of some workers handling testing for anthrax, et cetera. One sees that they're generally I don't know if this is not in a lab, but some other workers investigating. But when I've toured labs, and thank you for this slide, there have been the number of levels there of what's required for breathing, for covering clothes, for cleaning before and after is pretty severe. I got to ask this question. Now, these aren't live, but this is a Ziploc bag. And I have to think, what in heaven's name would go through the minds of some scientists thinking a Ziploc bag is enough to protect someone from anthrax when you have other instances of all that paraphernalia someone has to wear when they're dealing with anthrax. Have you talked to these personnel involved with transporting anthrax and asked them why?
I have been directly involved in the investigation, and I will be directly involved in the remediation of the problems that we find. Many of the issues that are mentioned in the APHIS findings relate to what was done with the material that was believed to have been inactivated. So once the laboratory had said, here is killed anthrax, it was handled by the staff in those lower containment laboratories as if it were not infectious. Our subsequent studies suggest that it's likely that it was not, but the core error there was the failure to decontaminate.
But Dr. Frieden, this is like saying, I didn't know the gun was loaded, but somebody got shot. But you should always assume it is. For someone to say, well, I didn't think the anthrax was live, isn't acceptable. And quite frankly, I wonder if you have the ability to not only reprimand such personnel, but to fire them, to suspend them from working with pathogens that are deadly, or quite frankly, do they understand that the extent to which this went could have left them in a condition where they were charged with criminal negligence or negligent homicide or reckless endangerment? Do they understand the seriousness of this for the American public health?
I think first, your idea, Mr. Chairman, of a two-key system, as is used in other circumstances, is quite appropriate here, both within the high containment laboratories and to verify that stuff coming out is safe if it does come out, because stuff has to come out of those laboratories to be tested or worked with elsewhere. In terms of disciplinary proceedings, what we want to do is strike the right balance. On the one hand, we recognize the need to make sweeping improvements in our culture of safety, and part of that means that staff need to feel comfortable anytime saying, hey, there may be a problem here, coming forward. At the same time, if our investigation finds that there is negligence, that people knowingly failed to report or took actions that were likely to or should have been known to endanger themselves or others, then we will take appropriate action.
Well, I'm looking here. Dr. Dick had said that the people who were not approved were able to handle select agents, were able to access space containing or potentially contaminated with anthrax at least through June 17th, 4 days after the incident was discovered. Now, my assumption is these scientists and their aides are pretty smart people, but it's extremely disturbing to think they're not thinking of this. But let me ask this. It's been a week since you learned about the March 2014 CDC shipment of H5N1 influenza, and there was a 6-week delay in notifying. Have you found out why there was a 6-week delay, and was there a cover-up involved in that, or is this bureaucratic hurdles are too high? What was the cause?
I've only gotten some very preliminary information on that. I will make a general point, however. When we look at emergencies in emergency departments or intensive care units in the healthcare sector, the biggest problem isn't usually a failure to respond effectively when people recognize there's an emergency. It's a failure to recognize that the situation is an emergency or something that requires immediate attention. But we haven't completed our investigation of that, and we will look at all possibilities.
Is there any kind of notification or alarm system that lets people know when there's been a release or a problem there?
There are multiple alarm systems within CDC. In this case, it was a cross-contamination of a culture. So somehow, and we haven't figured out how yet, a relatively low virulence avian influenza was cross-contaminated in our laboratory with the high pathogenic H5N1.
I get more alarms going off when you try and walk out of Walmart with a shirt that hasn't been paid for. You see those happening all the time. Is there any evidence of cover-up here from employees not wanting to let someone else know that something else is
No,
something
we've
was
seen at this point no evidence of a cover-up, but we do see the need to strengthen the culture of safety that encourages reporting anytime there's a problem or potential problem so that we can assess it and take rapid and prompt action.